Alrighty, we are recording. Hello, everyone. I wanted to jump on and do a stream today because it had been a little while since I'd done a stream, and occasionally I get comments like, "Bro, when are you gonna upload again, man? You haven't uploaded in months, man." And I was like, you know what? It is time to do another video. So yeah. Going on to sort of the topic of today's video, ever since about 2013, when the black pill kind of formed, when I think what for me kind of cemented the black pill. I know there was a bunch of like spurky forums that, people like ER inhabited back in 2010, 2012, but the modern black pill really kind of began in about 2013 with the introduction of face and LMS videos. That's for me when it sort of solidified, right? Ever since about this period, people that are, black pilled have been talking about the hurdles that the average man or just men in general have to go through in order to sleep with a girl, right? We've kind of acknowledged it on this channel. But one thing I want to talk about in today's video is how it's almost like dark energy, right? Or dark matter in the universe. There's the inverse of this as well, which is all of the barriers that a lot of well-meaning guys online make men jump through. Social media, dating apps, they have risen the standards for men in terms of what even just a high-tier Becky would consider worthy of sleeping with, right? It sounds simple enough on paper, the factors that go into it sound simple enough, but the metaphor that I would use is it's almost like finding life on other planets, right? Like in theory, you just need a planet with oxygen and water and that's not too far from its host star and whatnot. But when you actually look at the different variables that goes into making a planet viable for life, the amount of time needed, a strong magnetic field, all of the things that can screw it up, that if they're just a little bit off, make the planet totally inhospitable, it means that planets like Earth are in all likelihood a very, very rare oasis. They might not be the only ones with life, but the vast majority probably don't have life if you take into account all of the factors. And yeah, it's kind of like, the factors that make a man pass the looks threshold, or just the threshold in general of personality and looks factors. You take a bunch of dudes at a bus stop, and the vast majority are not attractive enough for young, attractive women. That's just how it is nowadays. If you are a guy and you want to be the object of genuine attraction of like a genuinely pretty girl, if you meet a girl who's genuinely pretty and for her to be attracted to you, it's quite difficult. You have to pass a certain looks threshold that not many guys are able to do. And even then you have to go through all of the additional stuff. You can't put her off by having the wrong quote unquote vibe. I know a lot of black pillars are like, oh, you can be severely autistic as long as you're a Chad, she'll forgive you for it because women go for Chad no matter what. That's actually not true. I've done many experiments on Tinder with this that you can be like a giga Chad, but if you say something that's just like a little bit off, she'll start ignoring you. Chad is like the threshold for consideration, okay? It's tough out there. So if you meet a girl and she's genuinely attracted to you, right? Why the hell would you put up a series of barriers to stop her from being with you? You meet a girl, you're attracted to her, she's attracted to you, which is very hard to find. Why the fuck would you put up a series of pointless barriers because a bunch of red pillars online said that you should watch out for those? Those are red flags, bro. There are some people, some gurus or whatever, some MGTOW copers who will distinguish between a fuck buddy and a wife, right? They'll say, well, you can ignore some of these red flags if you're just looking for, for a one-night stand or for a friend with benefit or whatever. But many of them don't. Many of them speak from the default perspective of marriage, no hymen, no diamond, as Undead Chronic, as as the banner to his channel. Like, some of them default to marriage. Whenever the conversation of women comes up, the immediate default narrative is wife criteria, right? They don't even talk about like the criteria for getting a fuck buddy. It's all like, does she have a hymen? No. Okay, she's no good. Block her. Like, what? Like, you think of all of the barriers that it takes just to get a girl to find you physically attractive, and then you block her because she's not part of the like 0.01% of the female population who's over the legal age of consent, but meets all of these other nebulous criteria. Now, some dudes will hear me say that and they'll say, so what are you saying, CBP? Are you saying that men shouldn't have standards? And of course the answer is absolutely not. Of course you should have standards. I have standards. For a normie, I probably have unrealistically high standards. Do you want to know what my standards are as a 36-year-old sub-8 male? My standards are very unrealistically high. They are, I want a girl that I'm genuinely attracted to, and we have to have some sort of basic chemistry. You know, I have to kind of get on with her enough that I can be around her enough to screw around and have fun and just chill out together. That's my criteria. Do you know how small, especially in the West, do you know how small a pool of women that is? That's a very small percentage of the female population. I have quite strict standards. Now look, I'm not a big fan of like too many tattoos. You know, I'm not into the whole like porn star thing. I prefer only like maybe some discreet tattoos or maybe just one interesting tattoo. But come on, no tattoos. She's not allowed to have like a butterfly tattoo on her ankle. And what? She's not allowed to have any male friends. And I think a lot of the guys who advocate for it, they don't know that their advice is, it's not that it's outdated. It's like they're speaking from like a 1950s perspective. Like, we're not going around shopping for wives in the year 1954. If you were a young cad, you know, in your early 20s and, you know, a young prep school graduate in 1961 and you're looking for a wife, you know, to start your life with, then yeah, this type of advice would be kind of relevant, you know. But what criteria can I use to find myself a good shoe shiner on the street? You know, like what century are we living in here? Oh, and another point that Hormacks are brought up, which was actually a pretty good point actually, is you take away the 18 to 25 part, right? You take away 18 to 25 and you start compiling what a lot of these guys in the manosphere tell you is the perfect girl. And what it leads to is children. It leads to young girls, like 12-year-old girls. Like, you think about it, right? If we were to play an orienteering game, and it's like your next checkpoint is you have to find a female with the following traits that you see on screen. Well, you would go to an elementary school to find a girl with these traits, right? Like, a female is statistically more likely to have these traits the younger you go. Like from 20 to 16 to 12 to 8, you know, the younger a girl is, the more likely she is to have these traits. Putting up a series of barriers that are completely arbitrary, you know, to ward off women that aren't wife material, when you shouldn't even be looking for a wife in the West. It's like, their advice is just very outmoded. If I'm trying to get laid, these are the things that I look for in a girl. Like, if I'm on the internet and I'm trying to get laid, it's literally the opposite. You should be going for these red flags, okay? You should be literally fucking the red flags. So that's the frickin' video. That's the whole point that I wanted to make today. I think that a lot of these red pill content creators, I think a lot of them are just creating more incels, because what they're doing is they're teaching guys, you know, normies and even sub-5 males, that if you ever meet a hot goth girl, oh, you know, block her immediately, because if it was 1960, she would make a terrible wife. Like, their advice is well-meaning, but very counterproductive. So I wanted to come on here today and share some cooming wisdom with you, okay? Fuck the red flags. Literally. In fact, that can be your homework assignment. That can be each and every one of you's homework assignment, okay? By the time I do my next video, I want every single one of you to have banged a girl with a butterfly tattoo on her asshole, okay? That's your homework assignment. Hop to it. No, but in all seriousness, guys, I hope that you get some wisdom out of today's video. But yeah, moving on to just like, broader topics now. I will be doing more videos. I'm hoping to get like a schedule going on, like maybe do like a video per week or a video per fortnight, even just a short 10-minute video, just to keep the channel alive, even though I don't intend on doing anything major with this channel other than documenting my geomaxing potentially next year. But it's good to just drop by and say hello from time to time and do things in a bit more of an organized schedule. But anyway, I shall masticate over that. Another thing that might be a good idea to do is, look, I know I'm not like a source of wisdom or anything. I know I'm just like some spurgy rando who is not necessarily a source of wisdom at all. But one thing that was quite popular was when I did Q&A videos where I compile a whole bunch of questions that people leave me in the comments section and just do like a half an hour, 1 hour Q&A stream. So I won't do like a community post. I'll scroll through the comments and just see if there's any like topics that anyone wants me to talk about, and I'll, maybe dedicate 5 minutes per question, that sort of thing. Kind of like, like a live stream where people do super chats, but in a pre-recorded Q&A. So I might do that in the coming weeks as well. What else was I going to talk about? Nope, I think that's pretty much it, really. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over today. Actually, speaking of women having really high standards that even the slightest thing can throw you off, there's a girl at work that I'd say we're kind of friends, She's a lot younger than me. I'm mid-30s, she's 20, and she would confide in me about guys in the office that she found attractive. So there was this guy that is in our office. He's kind of a mutual friend of ours. He's a young guy, but he is kind of a Chad in the face, right? And this girl, this friend of mine, she had been checking this guy out for so long, like to the point that her behavior would seem creepy if it was coming from a guy. Like, I'm not even kidding. She wanted me to print out a photo. I can't remember what the occasion was. It was like race day or something, like, some famous Australian holiday where we were all expected to dress up, and he wore like a flashy suit to work that day, and she thought he looked so hot, him and his brother, who works in the same building, and she wanted me to print off a photo from the printer and give it to her so she could like take it home with her, to give you an idea of like how obsessed she was. But here's the funny thing. As time drew on, it turned out that he also had an eye for her, which he was just kind of, keeping close to his chest. But he had been admiring her from afar. So this sounds like a match made in heaven, right? You've got these two young people, she's quite pretty and he's kind of like a Chad light. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the black pill can go wrong. Or the blue pill can go wrong, I should say. She really liked this guy. She really found him really physically attractive, had some of the same mutual friends. Turned out they'd accidentally met like 2 years ago and they didn't even know it at that point. It turns out they'd actually met each other before. Blah, blah, blah. It seemed like a match made in heaven. But there was one sticking point. There was one thing about this guy that she just couldn't get past. It was the one sticking point, the one thing that gave her the ick, as she put it herself. And it's this guy is 5'11", okay? He's 180 centimeters. And look, I get it, right? Like, I totally get it, right? And I don't hold it against women that they have these standards, but I remember thinking about it and thinking, God, if there was ever an example of the black pill or the height pill, which is a component of the black pill, that like that's literally it, right? This young girl, this young single woman meets the guy of her dreams. You know, they live close together. They live in the same suburb. They work in the same building. They have mutual physical attraction, but he's 5'11", and that was all it took. Now, eventually they did decide to go out, and ever since they started going out, she hasn't said a single word about his height as a negative. Like, oh, we're so in love, he's amazing. But I just remember thinking about it, being like, God, that'd be a fun little story to mention in a video. So there you go. Actually, speaking of which, that's a great example of what I was just talking about. Like, that relationship right now is going pretty well. You know, whatever black-pilled, height requirements that she thought she had, once she got over it, she discovered that she really, really liked this guy. And they've been going out for a few months right now, and they're just a nice couple, they're a nice young couple. Even by like red pill standards, she's pretty good, she's got a very low body count. She doesn't have many tattoos. She doesn't have that many of the red flags that the red pillers would talk about. She's straight as an arrow, not a bisexual, not a party girl. But I guarantee you, if you were to go through her life and her identity with a fine comb, you would find a million things that a Coach Red Pill of the world would say, oh, stay away from that girl. She's got a whole bunch of red flags, bro. Whatever enjoyment he's getting out of that relationship, he never would have gotten that if he had listened to these red pill guys, because they would have probably said, stay away from her. She has an Instagram account. She has a smiley face tattoo on her ankle, something tiny like that, right? So that's actually a good example of what this whole video was about, but I digress. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that although some of these guys are well-meaning when they give you these, these facts about women, stay away from these kinds of women, gentlemen. Some dudes that have the I think it's called the apex fallacy. Those dudes that are kind of Chad Lights that have had plenty of girlfriends, and maybe at one stage they had a crazy gothic girlfriend who was, a little bit of a nut job, right? A little bit of a bipolar type who cut up his clothes and stuff. He might say, this Chad Light, who's had a whole bunch of girlfriends, one or two of them being crazy, might say to the sub-5, hey, bro, stay away from hot gothic girls, bro. Because I dated one and she was crazy. I think some of these guys are well-meaning. But on the other hand, I think a lot of the guys, I won't name names, but I think a lot of these guys that are going around telling dudes about, how all these modern women are just going to snake you and you should stay away from them, bro. A lot of these guys that are going around talking about, stay away from these modern women because of this and that, I think a big part of it is actually the crabs in a bucket mentality. Because what I've noticed is that, sometimes you'll show a picture of like a normie couple to some of these red pill guys, and they'll say things like, oh, she's probably cheating on him with Chad. They speak from the perspective. They're very skeptical of the relationship, right? They're very skeptical, but they speak about it from the default perspective of the guy is being victimized. He's going to be victimized somehow. She's going to cheat on him, right? But what I've noticed is that if you show these same dudes a situationship, as it's known, where you've got two guys, right? They're both dating the same girl. They're in a, not really a cuckold relationship, but a polyamorous relationship where there's two dudes dating the same girl. And this is more common than a lot of guys think, by the way. A lot of dudes have this idea, this misconception that whenever you see a couple in an open relationship, it's always the woman's idea. She wants to go off and sleep with Chad. And I'm not saying that this isn't a thing that happens. I'm not saying that there aren't women out there that convince their beta provider boyfriends to have an open relationship so they can invite Chad and Tyrone over for a three-way while the boyfriend sits in the other room. What was that article from Jack Murphy about, I'm sitting here and I'm happy as, happy as a clam while my wife goes out and gets fucked. Sometimes it is the wife's idea, but a lot of the time it's the guy's idea. There's a lot of dudes into this shit. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is, you've got a couple of these guys that are very happily in a polyamorous relationship with a woman, right? And these red pill MGTOW type guys, they will see an example of it, and they have contempt for these men because in their mind's eye, these guys they're kind of letting down the human race. They're letting down men in general. Like they are a disgrace to men. And that reveals their true psychology, their true agenda. They don't care about every man on the planet being happy. They care about some ideal of masculinity being lived up to. So if you're a guy, I'm not talking about being in a poly relationship. I know most of you wouldn't be into that. But if you're with a girl and she doesn't live up to the red pill idea of a unicorn, they'll often give you a kind of fake concern like, oh, bro, I just don't want to see you get cheated on, bro. I don't want to see you get used, bro. But what their real agenda is that she doesn't live up to their perfect ideal of femininity, and you're not living up to their ideal of masculinity by going out with her and being with her. They don't care about your happiness, right? Does this all kind of make sense? Does this entire video make sense? I hope some of you understand where I'm coming from with this video. Actually, since I like to use my space metaphors, as you can tell, another way of putting it is like this, right? In a couple of billion years' time from now, the sun, the star that we orbit, will begin to grow. It will begin to turn into what's called a red giant, where the sun expands over several billion years, and it will become so big that it will expand as far as the Earth itself, somewhere, in that sort of radius, right? And obviously, life will become uninhabitable on Earth. Now, it's very unlikely that human beings will be around in a couple of billion years when this begins to happen. But let's say for the purpose of this video, let's just say hypothetically, humans are around in 2 billion years or 3 billion years, whenever this is going to happen. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that human beings by this stage have developed space travel hundreds of times the speed of light, which I know is impossible, but this is all hypothetical. We can now travel hundreds of times the speed of light, and we find one other planet in the entire universe that is habitable as an alternative to Earth, and we can travel there. The equivalent of listening to these red pill guys is like looking at this planet, this exoplanet, and being like, oh, we can't move there, guys. It's not a virgin. That planet is not a virgin. That planet has a nipple piercing, like that's what these guys are basically doing. These guys are finding that rare oasis. These guys are finding that woman who finds you physically attractive. She prefers you over Chad. She is that exception to the rule. And they're going through and finding some excuse for you not to be with her. I hope that this video hasn't come across as me telling guys to have low standards, that you should have some scarcity mindset, that you should be like that guy from that infamous viral video, that Being Ugly My Experience, where the dude talked about how he took in some barracuda bitch into his life because she was the only woman that would give him any play. That is not what I'm advocating here for. I'm not saying that you should all go out and date some narcissist. I'm not telling you to date anyone, all right? What I'm basically saying is that you can have as high a standards as you want, but make sure they're your standards, okay? If you're the kind of guy that could never be with a girl who's not a virgin, like there's just something about that turns you off, is disgusting to you, that's fine. That's your standard. Now, it might be a very unrealistic standard if you're over the age of 20, or the girls you're trying to sleep with are over the age of 14. It might be an unrealistic standard, but what I'm saying is, if you're not somebody who has this need to be with a virgin, don't let these red pillars whisper in your ear that the girl you are with has to be a virgin. Don't let these guys, these red pillars, tell you what you should want, because a lot of them try to. Like, I remember, this was a couple of years ago now, some big normie channel called iDubbbz. I don't watch his videos. I had never even heard of him, but apparently he's a big-time YouTuber from back in the day. There was some scandal where it was revealed that his girlfriend has an OnlyFans account. Now, she's not fucking dudes on there. She's literally just stripping on OnlyFans, and iDubbbz was cool with it. He's like, whatever, you know. And he got trolled so hard. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, hypothetically, right, if I could have a girl in my house right now who lives with me, right, she lives in my house, she's very attractive, I'm attracted to her, she's hot enough that she has, like, thousands of guys paying for her OnlyFans, so I have an attractive OnlyFans content creator in my house. Would I fuck the shit out of her? Hell yeah. Like, all these guys saying that, you know, he's a cuck because the girl he's fucking has an OnlyFans. It was the perfect example of what I'm talking about. The guys in the comments section, thousands and thousands of them, they weren't worried about him. They're not like, oh, you know, poor iDubbbz, you know, he's being cucked somehow. They were angry at him because he had let them down as a man. And what I'm telling you in this video is, don't leave pussy on the table because a bunch of dudes on the internet or in real life are going to shame you for it. Like, if you were one of those dudes, you know, those chubby chasers, those guys that like fat girls, well, let's say you're one of those guys, right? And you meet this overweight chick that you're into because you're a chubby chaser in this scenario, and you want to go out with her, or you want to at least, you know, turn her into like a fuck buddy or whatever, but you don't make a move on her because you're embarrassed what your normie friends are going to think. You know, when you go out to the sports bar on Friday, you're worried about what they're going to think when you show up with a big fat roasty, right? Now, you might be one of those guys that's into that, but rather than pursuing what you want, you turn it down, you leave it on the table because you're worried about the social impact. That's essentially what I'm telling you in this video not to do. Don't be that guy that turns down, don't be that guy that doesn't fuck the girl with the OnlyFans because you're worried that you're going to get roasted for it and be called a cuck, right? That's what I'm saying. If you're the kind of guy who is disgusted by the idea of a girl that you're sleeping with having an OnlyFans, then don't do it, okay? Don't sacrifice your own standards. What I'm saying is, don't leave pussy on the table, which I know is a rather crass way of putting it. Don't turn down good women. That's a nicer way of saying it. Don't turn down good women because of some arbitrary red pill, you know, MGTOW-esque philosophy on what a good woman should be. That's what I'm saying, all right? And that's all I wanted to say in today's video. That's all I wanted to say. I think I'll wrap it up here, guys. Thank you for listening. If you have any idea for a video topic you'd like me to do, just drop me a comment, or just, you know, pop an idea or question down and I might compile it as part of a broader video where I answer people's questions and whatnot. So, yep, I'll be back. I'll talk to you guys as soon as I feel like uploading again. And yeah, enjoy Christmas. Bye-bye.